Welcome, welcome. All right, so this is my longer form video about building the deck from Theros Beyond Death. There were 36 booster packs in total, and they were draft boosters. And so after getting everything out, I did end up with 36 basic lands and a few unique named lands. And so I'll kind of go over that. I did get a hold of 500 basic lands at $15 from a local. That was a pretty good deal in my opinion. And it was nice to see that those kinds of people are out there in the community, since I do need more basic lands. And that's kind of solved my problem running into basic lands. In building this deck, I only had 3 unique named lands, and I'll go over those 3 in this to add. And so the rest of my lands were basic, but it totaled out to 39 lands is what I put in this deck. And so I think 14 of them came from the lands I got, and the other 22 of the 36, because 3 are unique, of the 36 basics, I supplemented that from the 500 lands I bought from a local. And so getting into the deck, the commander I decided to go with was Kunoros, Hound of Erithos. And they have Vigilance, Menace, Lifelink. Creature cards in graveyards can't enter the battlefield. Players can't cast spells from graveyards. And so I felt like that was a really interesting kind of dynamic, especially with, it seems like there's a fair number of cards that I've seen at least that do interact with either interact with the graveyard in some way. And so I felt like that could create some complications, especially for decks that are heavily involved in that. And in general, it seemed like a good card, 3 cost, 3/3. That's pretty decent, from my opinion, especially with that Vigilance, Menace, and Lifelink. Feel like this will allow for some interesting dynamics in the game. And so I wanted to use this as my commander. And so I settled on that as my commander. And then I did stick to cards from this set. And so I was pretty limited using just plains and swamp or white and black mana, since that is what this is. But I did focus mostly on creatures and enchantments with this, because that was the majority of what I did pull. There are a few other things, but we'll go ahead and get into this. And so the 3 lands that I ended up using from the deck, from my pulls, are the Labyrinth of Scophus, which is tap, add 1 colorless mana, pay 4, tap, remove target attacking or blocking creature from combat. And so I felt like that ability would be kind of useful. It feels a little expensive to use, but since it's repeatable, I feel like that's worth it. And so I was pretty glad to have that. And so I like having that in this deck. And then I also got Unknown Shores, which is tap, add colorless, or pay 1 and tap, add 1 mana of any color. And then the last one was Field of Ruin, which is tap, add 1 colorless, or pay 2 mana, tap, sacrifice Field of Ruin, destroy target non-basic land. An opponent controls. Each player searches their library for a basic land card, puts it on the battlefield, then shuffles their library. I felt like that would be a really interesting dynamic to use. Especially since everyone's going to end up gaining a land from it. But that that ability to destroy a non-basic land seems pretty useful since there are some lands with pretty interesting abilities out there. And then I included Altar of the Pantheon because this is a devotion deck in a lot of ways. A lot of the creatures in it and enchantments do trigger off of devotion, or devotion has some impact. And so I feel like if this artifact comes out, it'll be really helpful because its text is, your devotion to each color and each combination of colors is increased by 1. Tap, add 1 mana of any color. If you control a god, a demigod, or a legendary enchantment, you gain 1 life. And so there is a god card in there. I don't expect it to come out very often where I get the Pantheon and that card together. But when I do, I think that really, that bottom ability will be really nice to have, gain 1 life with it when spending mana. And then when I drew this, I was pretty excited by the text on it. Nyx Lotus. Nyx Lotus enters the battlefield tapped. Tap, choose a color, add an amount of mana of that color equal to your devotion to that color. And with the way that devotion works, I feel like that's really cool because if I can get that and the Pantheon out at the same time, right, that's going to increase the effectiveness of it. And depending on how many enchantments or creatures I can get out on the battlefield, I can really buff up that mana value, allowing me to do more each turn by tapping just the Nyx Lotus. And so I am excited to see if I can utilize that devotion feature in there and really build up some mana to be more effective. I included Davos, Blessed by the Sun, and Tarmat, Chosen from Death. They both have a similar first part where it says Tarmat's toughness is equal to your devotion to black, and Davos's says Davos's toughness is equal to your devotion to white. And so based on the devotion to white or black, that's going to determine their toughness. And then they both have pretty decent, in my opinion, secondary features, where Davos says whenever another creature you control enters the battlefield or dies, you gain 1 life. I feel like when he's out, he'll be able to help gain or give me a lot more life for the player that's playing them. And then on Tamarat, I'm probably saying that wrong because I'm terrible with names. Where it says, pay 1 mana and 1 black, exile up to 2 cards from graveyards. You gain 1 life for each creature card exiled this way. And so I feel like the potential to generate health with these cards and to buff them to be pretty big defenders is going to be decent. And so I'm excited to see if I can get them out and if I can pair them or use them in a way where they can help defend. But this deck is more of a slow burn, it feels like, where it's going to take longer for it to win the game, if it wins at all. But it will just to be more difficult to deal with because it will, or difficult to play maybe, because it does seem to me it feels like it's going to be a slower deck. And so this card is Aphani, the Cataphony. They have flying. At the beginning of your end step, you may exile an enchantment card from your graveyard. If you do, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. And so I'm excited for that. I felt like that was a pretty decent card since there's a lot of things that do trigger off of creatures in this deck, just entering the battlefield. And then I also included Erebos, Bleak-Hearted. They have indestructible. As long as your devotion to black is less than 5, Iberos isn't a creature. Whenever another creature you control dies, you may pay 2 life. If you do, draw a card. Pay 1 black, sacrifice another target creature, or sacrifice another creature. Target creature gets -2, -1 until the end of turn. I was pretty excited by this card in general. Feel like that's some really interesting dynamics. I might decide at some point to retool this whole deck and split all the white out and just make this just a straight black deck with this as the commander. Because I feel like that has a lot of potential. And I feel like if I can get the right cards that interact with the graveyard and exile, then this card, then the current commander won't be very useful, but this commander could become incredibly useful, especially if it can interact with the graveyard, right? Or I have cards that do interact with the graveyard, because it would allow me to more easily trigger those abilities and draw additional, or trigger his ability and draw additional cards. And so I am kind of interested in maybe creating just a black deck with that as a commander. And I also included Omen of the Sun, which is flash. When Omen of the Sun enters the battlefield, create 2 1/1 white human soldier creature tokens and gain 2 life. And then it has a pay 2 and white mana, sacrifice Omen of the Sun, scry 2. And I just felt like that enchantment was pretty decent with that scry 2 ability and bringing out the creatures. I thought that would pair well with Omen of Death, which is a flash. When Omen of Death enters the battlefield, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand, and then it has a pay 2 and 1 black, sacrifice Omen of Death, scry 2. And so I feel like if one or both of those can be paired with Eberros at some point, there's some interesting ability to see what I'm doing and make decisions in advance in triggering his abilities as well. And so I feel like there's potential for a lot of interesting interactions in this deck. And so I also included Akron of Falling Stars. And it's a flying. Akron of Falling Stars dies. When Akron of Falling Stars dies, you may return the target enchantment card from your graveyard to the battlefield. And since that targets an enchantment, and that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a creature, I thought it would still work with my commander. And so I am interested to see if I can get these to trigger and how I can use them and see what I can do with it, with the restrictions applied by that commander being out there. And so I also included Reverent Hoplite. I feel like I'm saying that wrong. When Reverent Hoplite enters the battlefield, create a number of 1/1 white human soldier creature tokens equal to your devotion to white. And so that's another card that utilizes that devotion. And so I am hoping to be able to trigger things off of that and get big effects from it. And so I also included Lagana, Band Storyteller. When Lagana Band Storyteller enters the battlefield, you may put target enchantment card from your graveyard to the top of your library. If you do, gain life equal to the converted mana cost. And I felt like that was a pretty good card in general. It's a 3/4 and costs 4 mana total, 3 of any mana and 1 white or plains. Plus that ability, I feel like that gives me some additional wiggle room where some of the cards are being sent to my graveyard from other effects. And so the ability to pull it from the graveyard and put it back into the library I felt was helpful. I also have favored Aroas, and they have Constellation. When an enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, favored Aroas gains double strike until the end of turn. And since there are a lot of enchantments in this deck, I felt this would pair well with the other cards in it. And then I have Blight, Breath, Catablias, Pause. Probably saying that wrong. When this card enters the battlefield, target creature an opponent controls gets -X until the end of turn, where X is your devotion to black. And since this is a black-white focused deck, I felt like that had the potential to be able to take out or really negatively affect larger creatures. And then I don't know that I drew this card from the boosters, but it is a THB or a Theros Beyond Death. They're both from the same set, right down in the bottom corner. And so I'm not 100% I drew it with this. I think I actually drew it from a previous booster that I had. Just a one-off booster pack. But I decided to include it when I was looking through just doing a black, an all-black deck with Eberros Bleak-Hearted as the commander. I like this card. It has flying and trample, and flying is good enough on its own, I think. But with that trample and it being a 7/7, this is really powerful. 7 cost. Right? And whenever Demon of Loathing deals combat damage to a player, that player sacrifices a creature. And so in general, I feel like that card is really good just by itself. And so keeping it, once I saw that it was part of the set, I decided to keep it in even though I don't think I drew it as part of the boosters. But since this is a set deck, I felt like it would still fit. And so I also drew a Gray Merchant of Asphodel. I'm probably saying that wrong. And when this card enters the battlefield, each opponent loses X life, where X is your devotion to black. You gain life equal to the life lost this way. And I really like that. It is a kind of expensive. It's 5 mana and it's only a 2/4. But I feel like because this is a devotion-focused deck, that could trigger for quite a bit of damage and health if utilized correctly. And so I am kind of excited by it, and I still think that it'll be useful. I also included Nightmare Shepherd, and it is a 4/4 and costs 4 mana, 2 of any kind, and 2 black. And it has flying. Whenever another token creature you control dies, or whenever another non-token creature you control dies, you may exile it. If you do, create a token that's a copy of that creature, except it's a 1/1 and it's a nightmare in addition to its other types. And so I feel like with the other cards in there, some of which do trigger off creatures dying and entering the battlefield, that this would give me kind of a double trigger. Because it's creating a token that enters the battlefield, but I'm not sure because it doesn't include that specific text if that second part would trigger. My hope is that it would, but I need to double check the rules to make sure that is how this would work. And so I am hopeful that I can get a double trigger if this is out there and one of those. But on its own, it's still a good card, I feel like. Just creating a copy could be really powerful, especially depending on what it's copying. And being a 4/4 and costing 4 mana seems like a pretty decent card to keep in there. And then I also included a Gravebreaker Lamia, which has lifelink. When Gravebreaker Lamia enters the battlefield, search your library for a card, put it into your graveyard, then shuffle your library. And it says spells cast from your graveyard cost 1 less to cast. And so there are some that in the deck that will allow me to cast them from the graveyard. They have escape costs. And so I feel like this has the potential to be really useful since it has that search feature. It might let me go find a card that I was not going to draw anytime soon that would still be something that could be helpful, depending on the game. And so I felt like that had some potential. And then it is a 4/4. It's 5 mana, so it's a little more expensive, but it's not tremendously so. So I still felt like that had a lot of good possibilities with it. And it fits with the overall theme of the deck, I feel like. And then I also included a Eidolon of Obstruction, or the one Eidolon of Obstruction that I drew. And it has First Strike, Loyalty abilities of Planeswalkers your opponent's control cost 1 more to activate. And so I felt like that would be a good thing to have on there, because if I do face off against someone who's playing Planeswalkers, increasing their costs would be good, especially if I can get this card out there to slow them down effectively. And then I have a Dawn Evangel. Whenever a creature dies, if an aura you controlled was attached to it, return target card with converted mana cost 2 or less from the graveyard to your hand. And so I do have a lot of enchantments. And since this is going back to my hand and not the battlefield, I felt like that would pair with this, since this specifically says enter the battlefield. And so I felt like that would still be good. It's a 2/3 and it costs 3 to get out there. And so overall, I felt like this enchantment creature had some potential in this kind of a deck. I also included a Transcendent Envoy, and it has flying. Aura spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. And that kind of ability, that always seems really good to have. The more you can get that kind of thing out there where it's reducing costs, that always seems like a big positive in any deck. And I included Inevitable End, Enchant Creature. Enchanted creature has, at the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice a target creature. I felt like that would be really good to play on someone else's commander. Right? I feel like that would be a really annoying card to deal with, but offers some flexible potential inside the game. And so I really liked the idea of that potentially getting attached to someone else's commander. Then Underworld of Dreams. Whenever an opponent draws a card, Underworld Dreams deals 1 damage to that player. That seems like a really powerful card to me. There have been other cards I've seen, like Ristic Studies, where they affect draws, and I feel like this has that same kind of problem potential, right? Especially if I can get it out early. With it being a 3 mana cost, an enchantment, 3 black, I feel like if I can get that out early, it can be really effective. I'm not sure how long it would last. I expect other players to have things to destroy it, but still, even if it taps away a couple health from people, from other players, I feel like that would end up being worth it. And I included my Eat to Extinction. Exile target creature or planeswalker. Look at the top card of your library. You may put that card into your graveyard. And then I also included Eberros Intervention. Choose one. Target creature gets X minus X minus X until the end of your turn. You gain X life, or exile up to twice X targets from your graveyards. And so the flexibility of that X and the cost, that always seems like a good kind of card to have in there. So I decided to keep that in. I also had an Idyllic Tutor. Search your library for an enchantment card, reveal it, put it in your hand. then shuffle your library. And since this guy's an enchantment, felt like I could use the tutor to help me get Eberros Bleakhearted out. And so I felt like that would be really good. Just in general, I feel like anything that allows you to search for any card is a good thing to have in your deck when you have the cards available to build with. And lastly, of the cards I'm showing you, I included a Heliod's Intervention, where it's that X and pay 2 white. It says destroy X target artifacts and or enchantments. Target player gains twice X life. So the flexibility in destroying artifacts and or enchantments and choosing how many you're destroying or just gaining twice that in life, that seemed like a really good card to include with a lot of potential. And so that's kind of some of the stuff that I included in it. And it was kind of designed around the Bleakhearted initially, and then I changed it a little bit, but majority of it is still going to pair with these and Daxos and Tamaret, as those were the top 4 kind of cards that went into thinking about building this deck when I was putting the cards together and deciding what to keep and what to hold on for another deck. And so I was pretty excited. I thought this would be some really interesting dynamic. I'm pretty excited with the way it turned out. I'll include a link to it on Archie deck. I hope you've enjoyed the video. I'd love some feedback either on Archie deck or here. I'm always looking to improve within what I can do and the limitations I've set on myself. But I am interested in other cards that exist out there, and I know that I'll be looking at building more decks. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you stayed with me to the end, comment, like, subscribe, anything helps. And I hope that you're having a lovely day.